Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Francis Valintine, toko ingoa. It is a pleasure to be here this morning on a topic, as Michelle said, talking about the future as a technologist, but also about what do we need to know as grown-ups. And it's really fun when we sort of think about ourselves as what do we need to know beyond the years when we invest heavily into learning, and actually how fast is the world changing? One of the areas I specialise in, won't touch on too much today, is artificial intelligence. And I would say the last 2 months we've seen about 5 years progress. And what we're seeing is change in the world so quickly, and we're not necessarily thinking about how that's going to change the way we work. And I really want to just say at the beginning of the session, if you're not really touching on this topic of automation, artificial intelligence, thinking about new ways of working and productivity, it's the best time to do it because the gap is only going to get bigger from here. What I am going to talk about is a bit of a mix between how young people think about retirement, if they do, and secondly, how is technology going to shape that? So I want to start by thinking of this world that we're in right now. And I'm excited by it because I think it's becoming more egalitarian in many ways. We're starting to democratise a number of things. You have access to knowledge in the way that my Encyclopedia Britannica didn't really give me. And we have democratised health through a certain amount through telehealth, through new ways of connecting with the health sector. We've democratised language. You can now almost speak in any language because we've taken the ability of having language turned into large language models and be able to interface through all sorts of different ways. And the list goes on. But we also need to understand the impact. So I'm going to call it exponential. And for those of you who do follow technology, you've probably heard of Moore's law, which is the art of accelerating return. And the idea of exponential is that the things that you see today are doubling constantly. They don't just sort of incrementally grow. Artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI, is not just slowly changing. It's literally every month getting twice as big and twice as powerful. And so we see this exponential growth, and we've never seen it in this way in the last, well, certainly in my lifetime. In the last 30 years, it's sort of like we've looked at technologies and all of them have followed the same exponential process. And so I really want that to be understood as we think about retirement and the years between when we're born and when we retire, about what do we do and how are we informed. The changes we're seeing in lifestyle and work are fundamentally driven by three things. One, technology. Two, lifestyle and generational sort of focus areas, the importance that different generations put on different things. And so they are changing based upon the values. I was told as a young person growing up in Hawara and Taranaki that if I had a house, a car and a job for life, I was good to go. Now, none of those things resonate with my 20-year-old kids who can't imagine a house full stop. They definitely don't want a job for life. And if they can have multiple jobs, all the better. And if it's a portfolio career of a suite of things. And a car is just like, if we had great public transport, then we wouldn't have that either. So we are changing values on these key things. And the other one is going to be around the environment. The need to reduce our carbon footprint, the need to change the way we think into the future, because every part of our economy is tied to energy. And so these may be outside of our everyday practices if you're sitting in, say, for example, a financial service company, but they are changing things because the money is flowing. I've just come back on a PM delegation to Southeast Asia. A couple of weeks ago, we went to Singapore, Thailand, and to the Philippines. And you note the younger the average age of a population, so if you say the Philippines, the average age is 25, the green economy is all they talk about, and artificial intelligence is just a given. It underpins as a hygiene factor across business. If you go to somewhere like Singapore or Thailand, when the average age is more in their 40s, actually it's quite different. They think and approach things in a different way. So we have demographic shifts that are happening here, and I know a lot of you have been talking about it, the rise and fantastic shift that we're having in demographics. But we also need to factor those in, those demographic shifts, and we have more Māori and Pacific youth being born and birth rates. We have an ageing population. All of that is going to affect how we think about retirement. So Gen Z. I actually had a discussion this morning with my son on the phone, and we're just talking about this. and he said, I'm still a Gen Z, right? I'm not a millennial. Please tell me I'm not a millennial. And I said, you're on the cusp. He goes, I'm a Gen Zer, I'm a Zoomer. And so there is this shift, and they're sort of basically this group of sort of 27, 28 and younger, down to where the alphas kick in, who are sort of into the primary schools. Their view is very laissez-faire when it comes to retirement. They've got this idea they're going to work for a very short amount of time, it's going to be a pretty cruisy job, we're going to feel good about it, and then we'll retire. And they, these statistics that are coming out of research are really talking about this idea, $500,000 should do us pretty well in retirement. And so there is a lot of misinformation, and I want to talk and unbundle why are they thinking this, or where is this coming from? A lot of it is because they're a little bit intimidated by the future. So actually the future feels a little bit intimidating, a bit scary. There's mental health and anxiety, there's climate. A lot of the birth rate decline globally has been put down to not only the cost of living, but also just uncertainty of the future. They're living in the here and now. They want to have life balance. And the whole work life is not a balance they think is really important. It's about having life balance. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can't hold it against someone as saying, I want more living now and less worry about the future. They also see things through a decentralised lens. Centralisation, the people in the middle, the banks, the health sector, the people who are the insurance brokers or the insurance company, they don't want those. They want to go straight out to the decentralised format of that. Who can do that? And of course, decentralised means fundamentally digitised. So they can go out and interface, which is why things like the blockchain are far more appealing in having cryptocurrencies than actually the traditional monetary systems. So decentralised is a very real thing for them. And we're starting to see that in other areas as well. We're seeing that in water around the world, decentralised systems for water security. We're seeing it in food security, decentralised community gardens, and countries trying to grow more food locally so they don't have to import and don't have the risk of logistics and the food security. In places like Singapore are very big on that. They don't grow their own food, so they have to think about how would they deal with logistics if transport became an issue. So they had this very strong decentralised lens on the world. And I just want to just take a quote from a conversation I had at the end of last year with a 13-year-old boy. He said, DeFi and the DAO model is the best platform as it offers the best compatibility and interoperability with Ethereum. Most of the cryptocurrencies they deal with are based on Ethereum through EVM compatibility or the ERC token. Last year, layer 2 players such as Polygon were very popular. Got it? So this is what you're about to come into. A world of language we don't understand. I had to do the explanation of all of them, because even as a technologist I was going, okay, got that, not that, not, yeah, and then basically took the recording and wrote it down from the recording because I was doing an interview with him. And he wasn't unusual, he was just a regular kid. He wasn't part of some little random group of... So what we have to understand where we are is we live in this world of an echo chamber. Doesn't matter who you are, which culture you are, what age you are, we all have our own confirmation bias because we love to surround ourselves with people just like us. Because then we agree. Families get on much better when they all agree. We all know what it's like at Christmas if you don't. If you've got different views, if you've got political views come up, it's like, just don't go there, whatever it might be. So the confirmation bias means everything's good to go forever. Because in my world, everyone thinks it's okay. So we do have to find ourselves outside of that little bubble and actually understand what's happening. We do need to talk to your 13-year-old kids and saying, tell me about your world and tell me about where your future is going. If we don't, all we do is see more of the same, and we actually stop being able to be in the communication with other groups of people. Because actually, you learn from things where there's disagreement and less harmony more than when you have harmony. It's a bit like you learn more from your mistakes than when things are great. But conflict is not a Kiwi thing that we love. We don't, one criticism we see is a bit of a sense of war. It's not a thing. We like to be nice. And so sometimes I think our niceness means we don't have the conversations because it feels hard and difficult. And the knowledge transfer between who has the best information might be the 12-year-old kid in your room, and that sometimes is hard to deal with. We also know that we're an ageing workforce, and particularly for our Pakeha Palangi population, is aging, and we're going to be around for a lot longer than we ever imagined. And so that also has a bias, because it means that a lot of our decision makers here are still in that group of over 55. And so they have a very different experience. The sum of their life is very different than a 35-year-old. And particularly with a 35-year-old who's lived overseas, who have migrated here, people who have had worldly experiences, or they're part of communities that are global. So we do have to acknowledge that, our population here and the average age, in that late 40s compared to, say, the Philippines, makes a big difference in how we have decision makers and who makes those kind of conversations come to fruition. So when we think about retirement savings or retirement planning, or even thinking about the fact that you do retire one day, hopefully, the financial tips of youth are fundamentally from groups that you may not spend a lot of time with, the likes of TikTok and Reddit forums and Substacks. And so they're in those environments, they are turning to people just like them to get advice, because the people they see outside those forums don't look like them, there's no representation, so they're going, where do I find the people who speak in my language? And so you need to spend time in those environments to see what they're hearing and listening to. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into this world. If you don't spend your time in Substacks, and if you don't spend your time in these parts of the internet, then here's some quick examples.
It's been an exciting week in crypto, lots of activity. Obviously, we've seen the market go up and down, which could be expected. Mm-hmm. I mean, last month, Bitcoin at 40,000 was like the Wolf of Wall Street. This month, Bitcoin at 40,000 is like the caveman in the snow with no clothing. But
Jim was literally complaining.
It's hard to panic. It's hard not to panic. Even after years of just 20-30% means nothing. Still,
honestly, I'm so unfazed, dude. I'm just so numb.
So unfazed.
I almost pray this thing goes to 15,000. Yeah. That's how much I believe
swing,
in it.
Doesn't matter. We're all cool.
If this thing lost
so you get this kind of a vibe, and then you get this type of vibe. I love his intros. They're all so dramatic and film-like. It's like.
What's happening, crypto fam? Welcome back to Love for Crypto. I'm Scott. It's a pleasure to have you here. I appreciate you taking the time out.
I have to say, this one I had to cut really short because the language got completely
This video, we're back on pensions, new age pensions. It's happening. I don't care what anyone says now. Like, you either on board and believe it, or you're just ignoring the data. It's as simple as that. But the next generations do not want centralized shite.
And we'll leave that one right there. But that sentiment is across these channels. They're talking about the old way. We don't want to be involved with that. And they're all doing it in their own charismatic sort of leadership style across these TikTok types of forums. And also, even look locally, you'll see the populations gravitating towards these other types of platforms. And I've just named a few here, and you'll know some of them, like Hatch and Tiger Brokers and Sharesies, and some great Kiwi companies or Kiwi affiliated or associated companies playing in these spaces. And so you really do need to start understand, what are they doing differently? How big is their market share? How fast are they growing? How much are people investing? What are they using it for? And that is so important to understand and not think about these as upstarts or startups, but actually real contributors who are understanding a market in different ways. And hopefully, if you're in the room, any of these, a call out to all of you for doing great stuff. If we go back to social media, and you look at Gen Z and like TikTok, there's also an abundance of people who are so successful they retired at 30. They seem to be by the hundreds. Like, if you got into that little algorithm, you would swear that everybody, if they haven't become a millionaire by 30, that they've wasted their life away. And so I'll give you just an example of the type of TikTok character that is really telling people that, it's so easy, you make a lot of money, and then you go on holiday.
I'll tell you one better. I'll tell you how much I made throughout my entire career. So I started off at IBM, where I made $74,000 in total comp. They also offered me a $4,000 signing bonus, some relocation, maybe some other stuff I don't remember. The job I got after that was almost double. I got a job at a small startup called Dwala, and they paid me $130,000 plus some stock options that ended up being worthless. They also paid for my relocation out to San Francisco. My next job at Credit Karma paid me around $155,000, and they gave me about $100,000 in stock. And my next job at Grubhub, I got lucky, the stock went up a ton, and my total comp went up to about $300,000 a year. My last job at Netflix, they pay me around $500,000 in total comp. So this is kind of accounting for all the perks like the 401k match, various benefits, and a free 5% in stock options that they give you. Through some luck and a lot of investing, I'm basically retired now. I turned 30 this year, and I no longer really have to work. I have 2 kids, and right now I'm making these TikToks for you guys.
And they're literally in abundance. You could, if you land on one of those and you click it, you're going to have these forevermore. So you really will feel this whole idea of like, what have I been doing? And so we do have a generation who spend, on average, 8 hours a day on TikTok. 8 hours a day. Now, TikTok is dominant. Some of them might, jump off and have a very small Facebook moment to check in with mum. But apart from that, it is very much the TikTok kind of world. And so you think about that kind of constant. If you had that in your life, you've got a day job, but you've also got this feeding coming through about how you should be very successful. You also have mainstream picking up on this, and there's this term called FIRE that's really big across, which is the financial independence, retire early. Sort of this idea. So even you go off the internet and you jump onto something like CNBC and you start getting mainstream.
Let's just recap the FIRE movement. I saw a lot of TikTok videos about this, a lot of Instagram videos throughout the pandemic. Financial independence, retire early. So as soon as you hear about it, it's hard not to deny the appeal. Admittedly, I even tried to calculate like how much do I need to retire right now? Am I saving enough? But it is harder to execute than you may think. And you have advocates that say you got to save aggressively, invest early to live off of investments in their 40s rather than 60s and 70s, which is why we got our panel today. I'm going to start with Grant, just to get your story. So Grant, you're a huge advocate of the FIRE movement. In 2015, at age 30, you had saved $1.25 million, but you say that's it is enough to not have to work again. So I'm a little bit curious about that. You've written a book about it. You advise people on how they can make short-term sacrifices to allow for financial freedom. So Grant, starting with you, Alex, I promise I'll get to you in just a few questions, but Grant, can you just tell us a little bit more about the FIRE movement principles and more specifically the ones that you chose to focus on?
Now, we won't go into that. You can go and find out about FIRE online, but it's just, again, this reinforcement. Make money early, get into a lot of crypto, and then you invest it back into crypto and carries on. So we do have to understand, while NFTs have gone a little bit off the kind of media over the last year with generative AI becoming so dominant, it's still very much there, and cryptocurrencies are changing, and there are some very big organizations getting involved, and of course they're starting to, sort of more traditional banks and systems are starting to recognize in different ways how they might get involved. I also just want to talk about Sam Altman. Now, I think most of you will know Sam Altman's name probably from OpenAI and generative AI and ChatGPT. He actually also is behind what this is called the Worldcoin. Now, if you didn't see this when it came out last year, I think it was in October last year, basically he has said if you want to be in crypto in the future, the only way to do it is become connected into Worldcoin. To join Worldcoin, you actually get some tokens, some value. The only thing you have to do to join it is you have to have them scan your irises. Can you see any risk in this? Can't see any at all. So I went in and basically their site, when they went live, by the time I heard about it, already had over 2 million people who are using it around the world. There's 30 different countries right now really dominating, but there are also brokers in almost every country, including here. And so they're building what they call this more human economic system, which means that if you want to be a part of the sort of the bank to the future, you need to be on this system. Now, as of this morning, it's 5.2 million people on Worldcoin. And so scanning of eyeballs is happening all over the world. And actually, so you go in, people are excited about it, they get a few tokens when they do it. For me, it became much more real just very recently, in April the 18th. We're talking in Argentina, where 500,000 Argentinians have gone ahead and done this biometric data and shared it. Now, of course, how do you open your phone? Most of us? Oh, interesting, it's your eyes. Didn't think about that, perhaps. So what are they gathering this information for? They're saying it's going to be because it's the only way that cryptocurrencies will be safe in the future, because every other form of protection will be gone because AI will undo it. But they're now actually starting to really get serious. It came very real to me when I was just in Santiago in March, and I saw in a shopping mall how this actually works. And this is literally the stand for Worldcoin, and I was watching as people came up, had the conversation, put their eyes up to that orb, and had their eyes scanned. And there was a line of people, and they were all getting in exchange for having their eyeballs scanned, this idea of having a few tokens. I've looked this morning at what the value of those tokens would be, and it was 27 cents. But they wanted to be in this thing because you can see by the people who are there, they're edgy, they're the cool set, they're kind of there attracting, and often people who are not in the banking system. So there's sort of an undercurrent of things happening. Now, Sam Altman is probably the most listened to technologist in the world today. He has an audience with the President of the United States and almost any other global leader because he is the founder of ChatGPT. And he is, at the same time, and his many investments, is running this. So you can start to see this isn't just some little startup doing something. This is the type of thing that if it landed in this market here, there's nothing we could do to stop it, and we don't know where that data is going. So the protectionisms are few on the ground. I just want to jump across and look at just some of the trends that are happening. And unfortunately, we don't have a New Zealand view of this in terms of emerging spending behaviour. But I think, for me, what's interesting is a mix here in this study between developing nations and developed nations. So you still have the likes of the US and the UK, but you've also got places like Bangladesh. Now, you may not be able to see this very well, but the types of brands and they associate with. So first of all, you see that bottom left-hand corner, 62% of Gen Z do not have a bank account. 62% across these markets. And if you look at the big ones that are there, the top ones, so you've got Apple Pay in the UK being the most dominant payment system, PayPal in the US, you've got debit cards in MX in Mexico, in Brazil it's called Pix, and then Paytm in Indonesia. And then they flow down from there. You're starting to see this a real change in the way we think about currencies. And currencies, of course, get tied back to the value of retirement. There's still a known currency. We're still hedged against the US dollar. And so when you start seeing these generations who don't sort of see the bank or the local currency as any form of their future or any form of the way they interact and purchase things, it gives you a different insight to where this group is going. Just to give you an idea, also in terms of the index of this study here about demographics of this prosperity index study. So you'll see here it's a US one I'm going to show you just to give you an idea. So there's a range of incomes. There is across the United States. Again, we don't have a New Zealand equivalent. We see here that Gen Zers feel far more themselves online than offline. And you'll see then on the 45% feel more themselves when they're online than in person. And you'll see that if you've ever been in a home in recent years on a landline. Has anyone got one of those still? Couple. And you put young people in the room and then ring that number. They are not going to answer that phone for love or money. Right? There's like, why would I answer the phone for someone I don't know who's on the other end? Even talking on the phone, if you ask, trying to ring your kids and they text you back, yeah? So this online presence, this idea that people don't want to interact in person. You'll see the boomers here, only 7% would rather be online and a very large percentage. So we're seeing this shift. So the relationships we're building, we need to be increasingly thinking about what happens when 45% goes to 55% and 65% of the generation coming through the alphas in the next generation and the kids who are at school today. In fact, talking about money by most audiences, including Gen Z, is one of the least popular things to do. So the general population would rather talk about climate change, mental health, politics, workforce, dramas, parenting, salaries, sexual experiences, above things that you might want to talk about your savings or bad investments. And Gen Zers, you see a similar type of alignment. This is not an easy conversation for people to have. And so I find that really interesting that there are things around relationship dramas, mental well-being and sexual interactions are easier to talk about than saying, I haven't got any savings, or I don't know what I'm doing. So these are, again, indicators of how big the challenge is ahead if we're going to get a generation to be thinking about their retirement. Because what we do know is the number of taxpayers in the time that I retire, but by the time my kids retire, it's going to be very small unless we have a huge migration focus, because we just won't have the same base, but we'll have a lot more people who are expecting a retirement fund, a retirement, a pension. So we need this conversation to be taken away from the stigma that's attached to it right now of being something you're embarrassed about, you don't earn enough, you don't save enough, and making it much more mainstream. I also just want to talk about the technologies that are shaping this. So we've had 3 major technologies in the last 30 years. The internet. Everybody has that dial-up sound embedded in their brain. The thing is, when you had the internet, it took a very long time for it to become mainstream, because not only did you need a desktop computer, you needed to have a phone line, an account with a telco, and a modem. So by the time everybody got that, it took a long time, and it was a very gradual. We had the early adopters, and over a few years, and then we got more websites because it came more mainstream. And it wasn't really until we got into faster kind of connections that it really took off. The iPhone was the same. If you bought the first iPhone, it had a $2,000 price tag. So while we loved it, a lot of people, it was really coveted to have an iPhone, the majority of people were not going to go and spend $2,000. And even when you did, it didn't have anything like it does have the tools and the technologies on it today. Generative AI needs no investment. There are plenty of free options out there. You do not need to pay anything, and if you do pay for the very best in the world right now, which continues to be ChatGPT 4, it's $20 a month. So there is zero reason for anyone not to be using these tools. And of course, it's used for everything. It's used for your schoolwork, it's used for your friendships, it's used for, for study, it's used for everything that you do in your work. So we have to understand this exponential curve is going in a way we can't sort of go back in time to imagine, because we don't have any of the physical things you need to put in place like you did when you the first analog phone, when you had to lay lines and you had to do all those things first. So AI truly is taking over the world, and I'm not just saying that as a technologist, I'm saying it as an educator. But it means that the amount of content online is proliferating at a rate. So every minute on YouTube, there are tens of thousands of hours of content uploaded. And that is increasing because actually content can be created by AI so quickly today. So they're saying here, so the European Union law enforcement agency is a very serious agency. They're doing a lot of work in guardrails around AI. They're saying within 18 months, which is actually now 4 months in, so 14 months' time, 90% of everything online will be generated by AI. And that's because what we have today is just going to be a small subset of all the stuff that's going to be created. We won't talk today about how much energy you need to write a prompt and do that, because it's actually terrible for the environment, but people are creating at a rate we've never seen before. I'll give you an example of how far AI, and I could show you so many examples, but here I am. I have a video about artificial intelligence, but actually I want to put it to a different audience who speak Hindi. I don't unfortunately speak Hindi, so I just push one button and...
अपने व्यापार को अगले स्तर तक ले जाने के लिए नवाचारी तरीकों की तलाश में हैं। जनरेटिव एआई आपकी ऑपरेशन में मदद कर सकता है और आपको बदलते बाजार में प्रतिस्पर्धी एज दे सकता है।
And we can do that in almost anything today. I can create my own likeness, I could talk to my own AI, I would not be able to tell the difference. So we live in this world of GPTs, and I think GPTs are going to become the financial advisors of the future. So apologies, this gets a little more technical. If you haven't been into ChatGPT before, you won't necessarily understand this interface. But if you are familiar and you are extensively using ChatGPT 4, the paid version, when you go in, you have an option of a marketplace of GPTs. That means there are other people who have created these large language models that you can search. So if you go in there, you get this interface. So you can search for a large language model on any topic you want. It launched just a couple of months ago. Since then, 185,000 new AI companies have spawned out of that are public, and 3.5 million that are privately owned by companies. So when you go in, so this is how it looks. I would go in, and again, you're not going to see this very easily, but I've just put in a search of florist, and it gives all the florist ones. Everything I want to know about flowers and floristry, I've got one there about packaging. So if I said I want to ask questions just relating to packaging, all the ones, and I can keep scrolling. I've got one around travel. you can literally put in any topic. So if I go in, and this is how you may see ChatGPT if you use it regularly, I'm just going to show you what happens if you think about retirement. You go in, and so instead of doing your normal ChatGPT, you'd go into exploring GPTs. You would search in, for example, retirement advice. And now all of these, they keep going and keep going and keep going. I'm just going to go to the top one, which happens to be Henry. Anyone here from Henry today? No, maybe? Okay. So Henry has got their own retirement planning and advice, so I can now go to their large language model, ask a question, and instead of maybe what I might have done is gone to my financial advisor, I'm now going to get advice directly from Henry's AI bot, from their large language model. And I'm hoping you're following this, because this is so easy to do. And I'm over time, but I'm going to hope for some forgiveness right now. Just going to, a couple more. I'm getting the thumbs up. Good. Okay, so we can get that information. So then you can create your own GPT. So the same thing, but this time instead of going to someone else's, I'm going to create one. So I'm going to ask for a financial literacy tool for adults aged 25 to 45 looking to plan their retirement. So all I do is put that prompt in. You can see the little GPT builder. This is in real time. Great choice. It's going to give me, okay, so it's given me a name. How about I call it the Financial Navigator? I'm like, yep, perfect, that's good. It's now going, I'm going to give you a picture because you'll need one, because if you want to publish this, you'll need a little icon. So it's creating. Again, this is real time, so we'll have to just, take a couple of breaths while it creates some. So there you go. It's given me this little icon. Yep, that's good for me. I'm going to go with that. Now, while it's doing that, at the same time, it's creating a large language model. I can put in any data I want into this. This is mine. So I can take all of my financial planning data. I can take all my custom information anonymously. You anonymize the data first. Put it into the large language model. Everything on our website, any documentation, so it's your tone of voice, whatever it might be. I can ask that question, and I'm saying, what do I want this to be about? And actually, I'm creating my own large language model within about 3 minutes. And so now I can just go to my large language model and get advice. So a business can do this too. So like Henry has done it, you can do the same thing. You can add your advice. So if someone's going in, they can go to your large language model. And so it's just building it here. So I just want to show you, a lot of people are starting to hear about these LLMs, the large language models, and they're not sure what it's all about. And there's lots of ways you can do it, but you can do it just through OpenAI. And this is not costing me any more than $20 a month. Okay, so I won't go through all the detail, but I'm literally going to have an interface where I can ask any question at all. I just want to show you how accurate it is, because I think it's really important that you see these tools, that they're not, people like to say they hallucinate. They hallucinate very infrequently if you're doing a paid version. And I say around 1% of the time you may not be perfectly right. You want to check it, but it's probably better than most humans. Certainly better than me. So the builder, okay, so here we go. So it's building it. So I want it to be approachable. I'm giving it some tone. Okay, so you get to do all of this yourself. You can have as many conversations with this robot as you like to get it to how you want it to be. Okay, so now it's finalized. So I'm not a very good fast typist, so you just have to... I did pre-record this for this reason, but it's still not very fast. So you could go in there now and do this type of question. So I'm 35, I earn $89,000 per year. And, typos, let's go again. So you can talk about how much your partner earns, or how much your kids' schooling is, or whatever it was that you want. As many parameters as you want at all, so you can start getting financial advice back from your own bot. Costs that you're outgoing, your rentals, maybe you've got a mortgage, etc. Okay. Okay, so I'm asking for some guidance. So now that this navigation tool, which is now my navigation tool, it's owned by me, is giving me how much, all the questions. So you're starting to think about how the budgeting might work. It will go through. And this will give you right down to questions about who I could talk to, which financial advisors, which companies, which websites, should I go to Sorted, all those things that can come through. So you start to see how these sorts of interactions for a digital community who love being online, who are using these tools extensively, will start to see these types of alternatives for advice. It's anonymous, they love that. Don't want to tell anyone who I am. They can get that advice, and then you can keep having this interaction with them, and it's all just done within a few minutes. So what I would say, if you're thinking about what do I do about all this, I would use these 4 words. What do you do more of? What do you raise? Like, you knowing this, what have you not done enough of to lean into the future? Raising the things you're not doing enough. What no longer makes sense? And why do we just start the elimination process of maybe some services, some products, some things we've done that way for a long time, to give yourself some breathing space to start focusing on what you should raise? What could you create that's new? Something that you dip your toes into the next iteration, the next generation, the next product, so that you've actually got some roadmap ahead to where you want to go. And then what do you start reducing, knowing that you might have a very large part of your population or clients who are of a certain age, and you realise that actually their advice needs are maybe declining because they're getting older, and then you might start saying, I want to start reducing the focus on that group and start focusing instead on the raising of the group of 35-year-olds, for example. So I think it's a great framework if you're just trying to go through and saying, how do we transition between this world we are now into this new world? And then basically saying, how do we decouple the limitations of the past? Because there's a whole bunch of limitations, things we could not do before that we can do today. And if you just give me one more minute, I just want to show just again how far AI has gone. This morning, literally out in the lobby, I went to the site here and I said, I want you to create an upbeat, optimistic pop song for the New Zealand Retirement Commission for a Gen Z market. It gave me 2 options. The time for it to create it with lyrics, with the soundtrack, was 12 seconds. 2 songs. I'll play a bit of both, and I'll let you have the stage back. Here we go. So here we go. Here's the information I gave it. It's creating. And so this is literally a free tool if you want to go and impress your kids tonight. You can go in and put any style of music you like and ask it what the song's about. It'll write the lyrics for you. It will be able to play. You can download them and you can use it. And here we go. The first one.
Invest in your future and secure your dreams. Build a nest egg, ain't as hard as it seems. Gen Z, it's time to show your power. Saving for retirement, start right now. Hey, compound interest, it's a magical beat. Watch your money grow, yeah, take a seat. Skip on the splurge, make your money and move. Retirement's the goal, gotta get in the groove. Hey, budget like a boss, keep your spending in check. Start investing young, here's the perfect day.
So I'm just going to play a little bit
Retirement
more of the other one
savings,
to go
plan
on.
like a game. Let's play, secure your future, don't delay. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm just going to give a couple of seconds of this one. So here's my
and
alternative track.
secure your dreams, build a nest egg. Ain't as
12
hard as it seems. Gen Z, it's time to show your power. Saving for retirement, start right now. Hey, compound interest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis.